Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Get Stuff Done podcast. I'm your host, Gordon Dudley, and I'm once again absolutely thrilled to be joined by another fantastic guest. Today, I'm joined by Nicola Weir, who is currently a partner at Deloitte. She's based in Seoul, but originally from the UK, like myself, and has been with the firm for a great many years, before which she was with another accounting firm. And over the course of her career, she has been able to work in the UK, in East Africa, in Nepal, Singapore, Indonesia, and as I mentioned, she is now based here in Korea with her husband and two kids. One of her specialities is being an advocate for women's empowerment. And in fact, she has actually dabbled in the childcare space, having developed an app in the past, which is definitely something that I'm going to ask her about in today's talk. She is a great friend of mine. We have known each other for most of the time that she's been here in Seoul. And I'm really looking forward to talking to her because I believe that she has a lot to say about what it takes to get stuff done. So, Nicola, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Gordon.
So tell me a little bit about how you have come to be a senior partner at Deloitte, one of the world's leading consulting and accounting firms.
Well, I'm not quite sure I'd say I was senior just yet, but that's on the to-do list. But I've had a really varied journey actually in Deloitte, and Deloitte have been amazingly supportive of enabling me to continue to move around the world with them. So I started out in a classic consulting role and progressed through that for many years, and then had an amazing opportunity to go and be a director in the technology practice in East Africa, and so helped set up the tech practice there in Tanzania. And then moved to Deloitte Mozambique, where I helped with the merger between Mozambique and the South African office. And then took a little break after a couple of kids. And I can tell you a bit more about what we achieved in the break. But then moved to Nepal, again, not with Deloitte, but eventually went back to the UK and rejoined Deloitte. And had a really interesting experience in operations, and then heading up societal investment, societal impact, and then the carbon program and around environmental and ESG, and then ran that across the UK and Europe before taking on a similar role for Asia Pacific. And now I am head of ESG in Deloitte Korea, and then also look after what we call internal sustainability for Asia Pacific.
Fantastic. I mean, a wide range of specialty areas, a diverse range of countries. And one of the things that stuck out to me right away is that one of my previous firms told me that were I to leave, I would never be able to return. That's their policy, their standard policy, that if you leave, you are not welcome back. But it seems that Deloitte have quite the opposite kind of policy. And actually, I hear other companies really benefit from developing a strong alumni network to be able to capitalize on people who can go out and gain other skills, other experiences, and return fresh into new areas and bringing new expertise. And it seems like that was the case for you.
Oh, absolutely. Our mobility program is absolutely outstanding. And I think that the point about network is absolutely key. And I think that's been a big thing in me getting stuff done is I make my network's important to me. Relationships are important to me. And ultimately a company like Deloitte is a people business. So investing in your network and building those relationships, I think has kind of eased the path somewhat, but the mobility program there's lots of opportunities. It costs so much to hire these days that actually, investing in really smart programs with your people is key.
absolutely preaching to the choir. Retention can be a fantastic way to. It always, we always talk about what drives companies the quickest is the bottom line, and if costs can be saved by retaining people, but that's only the half of it, right? It's about the upside potential that is realized by having somebody developed, as you said, and invested in. You touched on the very name of this podcast, Getting Stuff Done. So I'll jump straight in with the standard questions that I love to ask all of my guests, which is, what is it for you that makes you get stuff done, or what is it that you feel has driven you to get so much done in your career so far?
It's probably from being a kid. I mean, I don't know, maybe all your guests say that. But I grew up on a council estate in the UK, and both my parents had 2 jobs each, and they had a very strong work ethic. And so money was always a point of stress, and my dad always had this drive to be better and instilled that in me, and ensuring even things like homework and it must be done, and having manners and those core values which are key. And then seeing him progress in his career and working so hard, and that's instilled those right values in me. I think the other big thing for me is about choices. I think having lived all around the world, and you see so many people who just simply don't have choices. It's such a privilege, and I drill this into my kids all the time, that we've been given this immense privilege of where we have, what we've been born into, and the resources that we have. And so to use those choices widely and to keep enabling that environment, I think is key.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that it's so easy, of course, to think that times are tough, things are hard. What is it that we can do? How can we keep going? But you're absolutely right. The majority of people in this world don't have even the option to consider what they should do, or whether they like this or don't like that. It's a matter of survival. So I think that's a key point. So you feel that is just kind of really just shaped you to continue to keep working. So would you say that is still the thing that kind of gets you up out of bed every day?
Yeah, and I think, again, I have an amazing job where there are very few people who are working, properly working in the field of ESG, where they have the ability to influence a company like Deloitte with such a massive global network, spend power, etc. And so kind of reminding myself, which is not always easy, but reminding myself that, I do have, as a woman, I have a seat at the table. I'm technically sound in this area. My stakeholders listen to me, and I can start to make a difference. So it's about remembering to use that opportunity as well.
Let's kind of dip into that about your status as a woman. When you joined the firm, was it such a kind of equal opportunity in terms of being able to have a say?
No, I mean, the UK, back in the early 2000s, late 90s, was a very, very different place to where it is now. And I think that there was a real dearth of female role models. I can remember kind of 1 or 2 that really made an impact. And those were, people who were really, like, one of them, for example, came back to work 4 days after giving birth, just because she couldn't take the time, or felt that she couldn't take the time. An environment where there was a lot of banter, where sexual harassment was high, not particularly in Deloitte, but in the London environment, and that, dress codes of what women should wear and how women should behave, is outrageous, really, when you think about it. And actually, what I feel, in a way, coming into career, I feel like I'm almost reliving some of that.
Okay.
And but now I'm one of the people who should be a role model. I'm in this environment which is very male dominated, but I see a lot of women coming up who simply don't have enough female role models to help guide them. And it comes back to that network piece of, if you're going to progress in any organization, you need to have people who are supporting you, who've got your back, who are advocating for you. And if all of those people are men, of course, some men will absolutely do that. My husband does, you do, many of the men I work with do. But actually, it's so much easier if you can relate to that person, the experience they're going through. And I think the way, women's empowerment is lacking, definitely in Korea. And so creating those opportunities is going to be key. And especially I think that's why the issue with childbirth is so relevant. And at the minute is because people are pushing back against that to say, I don't want to take time out of my career. I want to progress, and not have to deal with the pressures that puts upon them.
Yeah. I mean, I always come back to it being such a terrible irony that up until tertiary education, there's pretty much equality, right? In terms of, good, highly qualified, smart, fresh grads. It's pretty much 50-50, and in some countries, slightly higher female graduation rate, in fact. And then a path just starts of going off track, if you like, where it deteriorates, and then it gets increasingly worse and worse and worse as we progress through age and then also seniority, especially in organizations. So it makes it somehow worse in a way that the talent's there. It's just not being capitalized on. And maybe that is exactly kind of what we mentioned already about retention. If we could retain, I mean, especially in Korea, where after the first child, the female participation rate just drops off a cliff and doesn't come back. That is automatically taking a huge chunk of the workforce out. So that's something we can work on.
But on that, I've got this interesting analogy, which is in when we lived in Tanzania, the traffic was horrendous, absolutely horrendous, and in Dar es Salaam. But the president would come through and they would clear all the roads. And so every time he went through, there was no traffic. So it was an easy journey for him. And so there was this raging debate happening all the time between the government and the people, which is they would say, well, there's no traffic problem in Tanzania. And everyone would be like, oh, there's a massive traffic problem in Tanzania. But because the decision makers weren't seeing and feeling the problem, the change never happened. And it's exactly the same with gender pay gap and women's empowerment. If you continue to have a workforce that is top heavy with men, they're not going to experience the same problems that the women are experiencing. And so they won't have the empathy in order to drive the change, especially if, there's differing opinions at home or they've made conscious decisions about their family setup. Human nature is you represent typically what your unit is about. And it takes a very mature person to kind of look beyond your window and see what influence you can change.
Yeah. In your work, so I mean, of course, the level of equality within your firm is relatively good compared to perhaps some other sectors. But I'm sure that maybe some of your clients are in those much worse performing kind of sectors, the ones which are so much more traditionally male dominated. Is that then something that you come up against? Have you ever almost literally kind of been held back when it comes to client facing work? Is that something you've kind of literally come up against?
So I personally haven't, I haven't experienced that. I've typically, I think having a technical expertise is helpful, as well. And I think the seniority is good. I think where I've seen it is in my personal life, actually, where when we lived in Mozambique, I took a break, because I just had 2 kids and felt like I was at crossroads in my career. And because I'd taken this break, I was trying to figure out what I was doing. And it was so fascinating how I immediately was given this identity by our peer group, actually, of being the trailing spouse. And I was probably very sensitive to it. But I would walk into a room and no one would want to speak to me. No one would ask me what I did or what I was doing. The assumption was I was, a lady who lunched, who was following my very impressive husband around the world and raising the children, which, I'm nothing against, but it wasn't who I was or wasn't who I wanted to be. And that judgment really, it really bothered, made my blood boil. That there was these kind of very classical assumptions made upon particularly women, but some men as well, of what your role should be if you weren't defined by this job title. Fascinating. And so I set about with some peers to change that. But again, it was not so much about changing that voice and that judgment, but around kind of trying to prove to ourselves that we had, that we were successful and had a voice and etc. So, but I think it is, it's a common problem, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, the definition of a person by their job title is something that is rampant, and I hate it. I try to encourage people to not introduce themselves by their company and title. I understand that sometimes it does serve as a door opener. It does serve as a way to gain recognition, but it's interesting to hear that immediate kind of transition was apparent. And so, was it around about that time when you dipped into the entrepreneurial life and decided to develop an app? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so there's absolutely amazing. One of the highlights of my career actually has a dear friend, Hannah Eames, and I set up an app. The problem that we were trying to solve was we were working mums and working dads, and we wanted to have flexible childcare that didn't involve paying for a nanny at whatever £50,000 a year, but it needed to work around the schedules of two working parents, or not just working parents, but that was the kind of baseline. But it needed to work to allow flexibility for families. So we developed an app that was basically like a babysitting booking app, very simple, where you could key in what you wanted, whether it be after school care or evening care, and quite simply it would send out to a network. So you would befriend trusted childcarers. So the idea being you and I would join. We would both put our trusted childcarers on. I trust you, ergo I trust your decisions on childcare. And then you go from having one babysitter to having 2, 3, 4 babysitters. So really cool model, and that kind of domino effect. But as we'd just get it all ready, we'd launched, we'd built it, and then COVID hit. And no one was going out. And as a startup, you need investment, you need a runway, and you need a business model that works beyond a pandemic. And so the investment needed to keep it going was not feasible, unfortunately. But maybe another time in a different world, we'd do it again.
I mean, obviously, you could never have anticipated that kind of timing. Have you secured some intellectual property around that? I'm sure you keep your eye on seeing whether similar apps have since appeared.
Yeah, and there are competitors that are doing well. It's no, we put it down to a great learning experience, and actually Hannah and I made an amazing team, very different personality types, and that kind of, like you say, in the terms of getting stuff done, being able to allocate tasks according to strengths was really key for us to be able to work in a really agile way. So yeah, unfortunately, we put it to bed for the time being, but we've got many lessons from it.
That's fantastic. I mean, and definitely part of the journey. And you now in your role, you are managing a team, so your performance is to a large extent dependent on the performance of your team.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about your journey as a leader, how you've come to try to define your own leadership style, what that is, and how you help others to kind of get stuff done whilst you yourself are getting stuff done.
Yeah, and I think so I work quite flexibly. I have a team across Asia, So I work with 8 different geographies, and all of my team, my Asia Pacific team, are based online. So that adds an interesting dimension. So I'll focus on that because I think that's where it needs a very different style. So I think for me, it's kind of three big, maybe 4 big things. The first is around empathy. And this is something I've definitely matured as I've progressed through the firm. I think I went from being a very much just get stuff done, almost not robotic, but very driven, to now being able to see beyond what my work stream is and to see the bigger picture and what the connecting points are. And I think having that kind of more helicopter view and the empathy of people within the helicopter view is really important, and being able to adjust my style to get the best from others, and has been absolutely key to my success, I think. And that leads me nicely on to the second thing, is about network. I think anyone, I don't know any successful leaders that have done it on their own. All the leaders that I respect and admire have always got a really good support network around them, and they don't believe they can do it all. They will farm it out, delegate, use the resources that they have to get the best from others, but quite often they have a really strong network. And that doesn't mean they've got all, millions of best friends. It's just that they use their network very well. They take the time to invest in those relationships, whether it's asking about someone's children or following up when you say you're going to follow up, and being really respectful in terms of delivering on what you say. Then third, I would say, is my 80-20 rule, although maybe my boss wouldn't agree. But I think it's really important that, and with something I try and teach my kids, that failure shouldn't be seen as a negative. And actually we get the best results and creativity when we remain agile and not strive for perfection. Strive for quality, but not necessarily strive for perfection. And so I do tend to follow an 80-20 rule that, sometimes you got to get stuff done and we can perfect it later if we need to. But actually, if we're going to get things mobilized, then you've got to be prepared to turn things around quickly, not be afraid of making mistakes, and don't necessarily get too bogged down in the detail. And then finally, I would say, kind of linking all of these together, it probably comes down to trust. Like as a leader, one of the things I've got better at doing is trusting others, that just because they're not doing it my way doesn't mean that it's not going to get done in the right way. It's a big one with my husband, actually. So he never does it my way. So I have to continually trust him that he's going to do it. So yeah, I think they're kind of more the 4 big things that I've been working on as a leader.
Okay, so I'd like to kind of go into a bit more detail on your network, the network aspect. Is that something that what is it that you're doing on a regular basis to make sure that you have that useful network, that well-developed network? What are some of the actual very tangible, very specific things that you do to try to cultivate that network?
Yeah, good question. I did a amazing leadership course. It was called the Decelerator course, actually, with a chap called Gib Bullock, who's written a book on this. And he runs a week-long course out in Scotland. You go onto this very remote place, and you are the number one rule is you're not allowed to define yourself by your identity, and so it's by your job description. Sorry, so it forces you to ask more intelligent questions and describe yourself in different ways. And through that experience, I found a couple of things. One, the difference between yes and no. So, and I think these principles are really good for building a network. Okay. So having the confidence to say yes to things, even when you might not feel comfortable. Okay. Having the ability to say yes and to build a network and to collaborate. So yes, and let's do a podcast and write an article about it to kind of show that extra mile and give more to a relationship, and then being very clear on the no. So actually a lot of networks and relationships are built when you are firm on what a no is, and not being afraid actually to set very clear boundaries with your relationships in order to gain trust in that network. So that was quite a cool tool set that I took away from that in order to build out that network.
Absolutely. So I guess you've lived in so many different countries. What are some of the different cultural aspects of building relationships and getting stuff done in very, very unfamiliar circumstances? Maybe even right here in Korea, where we're both sitting today.
Yeah, and it's I sometimes feel like I have split personalities on some days. Especially because some days I can go from talking to Australia to Japan to Singapore to Korea to the UK to the US,
Okay.
and actually they represent very, very different cultures and very different working styles.
Sure.
And so we might have one single objective, but the way of achieving that objective is very different. The way of getting buy-in and stakeholder engagement is very different. So I think how I've overcome the challenges is to try and spend a little bit of time listening. I think, it's a very classic consultant that we have all the answers and we jump in. And I certainly used to do that when I was younger, but I think stepping back a little bit and listening and understanding what individuals need to be successful. Because I find people generally want to be helpful. But quite often barriers are put up when they feel threatened or overloaded or, overwhelmed, or just don't simply understand the context of which you're coming from. So stopping and listening and taking the time to adjust my style to theirs has been a really important lesson for me in living in different cultures. That whole business chemistry.
Yeah, and it seems you're very much aware of being adaptable and being situationally changeable depending on where you're at. What would you say for you has been the toughest business environment to operate in for you?
I don't know. Probably the UK back in the early 2000s, I would say.
Okay. Unexpected, but
I think because actually, as a kind of bright young woman wanting to be heard and then not necessarily having the support structure around you, it's quite intimidating.
Okay.
And I think that confidence and ability to get the cut through and to progress only comes when you have that ability. You have the support to learn and to grow. And I've had that in latter years, so I've been able to kind of cope with those situations a lot better when putting them. But sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And I think when you're starting out in your career, that was probably the most challenging when I look back on it.
Okay, all right. A bit of a classic follow-up question then. If you could go back in time, would you do anything differently?
No, I'm a firm believer in you don't mess with what's gone by. So there's a book my mother's reading about the 1 minute coffee or something it's called, and it's about what would you go back and change if you would change one thing. So no, I wouldn't mess with anything. Serendipity is my favorite word. So I think, obviously there are lots of things that I would probably approach differently. Probably far fewer tears would have been shed. But I'm pretty
by you
good
or by others?
Typically by me. But I'm pretty good at reflecting and realizing that, you got to learn from these things.
Tell me a little bit more about your specialty field now, ESG. I know it's something you're very passionate about. I know it's something that you post regularly on LinkedIn. So if anyone is specifically interested, please do connect with Nicola. Beyond this podcast, tell me what it is that in your work that you're able to do to try to kind of move the needle or at least advance these issues.
Yeah, so I wear two very different hats. I think I'll talk about my career hat, and I think what's quite exciting about where I'm at in career is one, I'm a female leader as a minority. I'm a minority in that I am a Western woman. I know ESG inside and out and have experience in applying that in a UK and European setting. So I've quite a lot of context to give for a country who are fairly behind on ESG, but very much interested. So I see it as a unique opportunity of my position to be able to say that yes and quite a lot. And so I feel like in career, I've been exposed to lots of really cool opportunities of being able to present or create partnerships where you can come to the table with ideas and they're being adopted pretty quickly because there is that appetite there. So that's what I really enjoy. And then from an Asia side, I get the opportunity to work across all these different geographies, and again, who are all at very different steps of maturity when it comes to ESG and are facing lots of different challenges from, in New Zealand, which is small, and the government is well advanced when it comes to ESG, to somewhere like China or Japan, who are coming up, but are different aspects of things like transition to clean energy and things like that. And so actually applying lots of different skill sets to different scenarios is really interesting, and how we can help move that dial.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can see that could be an enormous challenge. It is with many different countries at different stages and different appetites, and then not least the differences when it comes to scale, budgets, regulation, and all of that. So I can see where you definitely have a lot of work to do in that area. Coming back now to getting stuff done on almost like a daily basis. You have a big job as a partner with Deloitte. You have a husband who also has a relatively high-profile job as the deputy ambassador to Korea, and 2 children as well. And I also have 2 children, and I know that having 2 children is already a full-time job in itself. So, tell us a little bit about how you kind of structure your day, your week, and how you're able to you said you're wearing 2 hats at work, and all the other hats as well.
Yeah, so I'm very old school. I love a beautiful notebook and a nice pen, and I tend to write everything down that I need to do, and I'm quite meticulous in my to-do list. We have a family calendar to make sure we have probably between 4 and 7, 8 events in every week, and so juggling that is pretty full on. So making sure the calendar is up to date is key as well. So just being really organized. I also run the Eisenhower model, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, of urgent, important, urgent, not important. And I try and instill that in my team as well.
For those who don't know what the Eisenhower model is, can you just give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, so it's in its most simple terms, it's a quadrat, and it's what's urgent and important. That's what you need to be focusing your time. Then you've got urgent, not important. So typically that's things that someone very important is asking for, and you need to just get it done. Important, but not urgent, typically requires brain time. And then not urgent, not important. You want to get that delegated or completely off the list. And so I work with that structure. Both in our admin, so we have a family admin, and then we have also, in my day-to-day work as well. And then I get my team members to do the same approach. I'm not a fan of big plans, as my team would probably testament, but I am a fan of to-do lists. And I think I read somewhere about when you have things in your brain spends its time processing the to-do list, and actually if you write things down, you free up brain space to be able to focus on what needs to be done. And I have this awful habit
of mental download.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of you're telling your brain, this has been put on paper, it's being dealt with, and now frees up capacity to do the thinking side. And I hate when I get into bed. It's like my downtime, and I tend to process then. And so I'll quite often have a list of things that need to be done that aren't on my to-do list. So I have pen and paper by the side of my bed to try and get them out of my head so I can focus on just going to sleep.
Okay.
But yeah, that's typically how my brain works.
So you do keep a pen and paper near the bed for those moments?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what that says about me, but
no, I mean, that's exactly what I wanted to find out. The thing that works for you, because everybody has their own thing. One of my previous guests said that she on the night mode of her phone, it's automatically set to say "don't do it." So when she picks up her phone at night and she's tempted to look at her phone, and she's just confronted with "don't do it." And
I love
then immediately
that.
she just remembers, I shouldn't be looking at it.
That's why I have the pen and paper, because we've decided to lock the phones away, because otherwise I'm on my phone.
Okay, you get them out, yeah. And now I'm still guilty of thinking that I might be able to do something productive when I'm lying horizontal after midnight on a tiny screen. It's something that I need to try to work towards. But Nicola, I think we're pretty much out of time now. Thank you so much. It's just not enough time. We've covered so many different topics within a short space of time. So thank you for being agile and able to jump around the different aspects of your career and your experiences. And thank you so much for sharing your insights on the many different environments that you've worked in. Thank you for being a guest today.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Gordon.
And thank you to everybody for watching and listening once again on the Get Stuff Done podcast. If you have not yet subscribed, then what are you doing? You need to get that done. Please subscribe on your favorite platform so that you can be updated with all the future episodes as they come out on a weekly basis. But thanks again for listening and watching, and hope to see you again on the next episode.